You think you know the routine. Open the app, watch the little car icon creep toward you, step into the back seat, and ride home. Millions of people do it every night. It feels safe because it feels ordinary. But sometimes, the ordinary is only the surface. Tonight, I'm going to tell you 3 rides that started out normal and ended up as some of the most disturbing nights of their lives. Story 1. The ride that wasn't mine. It was a Saturday, late spring, and I'd had too many drinks. My friends offered to drive me, but I waved them off. I just wanted to get home, crawl into bed, and end the night. So I ordered an Uber. The app gave me the driver's name, James, and a black sedan to look for. 5 minutes later, a black car slowed in front of me. I leaned down, asked if he was James. He nodded. The doors unlocked. I climbed in. The first thing I heard was the click of locks sliding back down. I brushed it off. A lot of drivers do that for safety. The back seat was stocked with snacks and water bottles tucked into a cooler. It felt generous, like he wanted that 5-star review. For the first few minutes, he barely spoke. Then glancing at me through the mirror, he asked, "Been drinking tonight?" I laughed nervously. "Yeah, too much." His eyes lingered in the mirror longer than they should have. Every couple of seconds, his gaze flicked back, like he wanted to study me. "What did you drink?" he pressed. "Tequila, mostly." He grinned. "You want more?" "I've got a bottle in the trunk." That's when my stomach twisted. It wasn't a joke. He wasn't smiling in a friendly way. I had to get out of here. I stared at my phone, counting down the minutes until the app said I'd be home. When we reached the intersection where he should have turned, he blew past it. "Hey, you missed my street," I said. He smiled. "No, I didn't." The words chilled me. I opened the app to double-check, and that's when I froze. The screen showed my ride had been canceled. I'd been marked a no-show, charged for wasting the driver's time. My real Uber was still back at the club waiting. I wasn't with James. I was with a stranger. I grabbed the handle to jump, but the doors wouldn't budge. He turned on the child locks. He pulled the car to a dead stop in the middle of a deserted block. Slowly, he twisted in his seat. His hand dropped, and a glint of steel caught the glow of the dash lights. A knife. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Panic blurred everything. I begged him to let me go. I told him my friends were tracking me, that the police could see my location. Lies, but it was all I had. He hesitated. For a long, awful second, I thought he'd lunge. Instead, he muttered something under his breath, unlocked the door, and said, "Get out." I didn't wait. I stumbled onto the pavement and ran, heels slapping wet concrete, lungs burning. Behind me, his engine roared and the car screeched off into the night. Later, I learned about Samantha Josephson, the student in South Carolina who mistook the wrong car for her Uber. She never made it home. She was found stabbed more than 100 times. I think about her every time I see that app open on my phone. I got lucky. I stepped into the wrong car and survived. But sometimes, one wrong ride is the last decision you ever make. Story 2. The woman who never spoke. It was a normal late shift. I'd been driving all night. Airport drop-offs, bar pickups, quiet streets half asleep. Around 2 in the morning, I got a ping for a rider named Elena. Pickup was near a hospital. When I pulled up, the lot was nearly empty. A woman stepped out of the shadows, mid-30s, hospital scrubs under a coat, hair tied back. She moved like she'd been crying, head down, one arm clutching her bag tight to her chest. She didn't say a word when she got in, just nodded when I asked, "Elena?" Her destination was 40 minutes out, a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. I figured she'd had a rough night. I've driven nurses, ER staff, they keep their emotions bottled up. So I kept quiet and started driving. The first 15 minutes were silent except for the wipers and the hum of the tires. Then, from the back seat, I heard her whisper something. It was so soft I thought I imagined it. I asked, "Sorry, did you say something?" She didn't answer, just stared out the window. A few minutes later, she said it again, clearer this time. He didn't make it. Her voice was low, flat. I hesitated. I'm sorry to hear that. She nodded once, still not looking at me. They said he'd wake up, but he didn't. I didn't know what to say. I just drove. When we hit the highway, I noticed something strange. Every so often she'd glance down at her lap, then back to the window, then down again, like she was checking something. At one point, a passing truck's lights filled the car, and I caught a reflection in the mirror. A small plastic hospital wristband still around her wrist. That wasn't unusual, I thought. Maybe she'd just gotten off a shift. But then she said quietly, almost to herself, I couldn't leave him there. I wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her tone stopped me. Instead, I focused on the road. About 20 minutes later, I realized the address she'd entered wasn't a house. It was the edge of a forest preserve. No streetlights, no buildings, just trees. The GPS said, destination on your right. I slowed down, confused. Are you sure this is right? She finally looked straight at me for the first time. Her eyes were red, but calm. Yes, this is where I have to go. She opened the door before I could respond. The dome light flicked on, and that's when I saw it. Her clothes weren't just wet from rain. The sleeves of her coat were dark, soaked through at the cuffs. She stepped out and started walking toward the trees, her hospital badge catching the light once before vanishing into the dark. I waited, half expecting her to come back. After a minute, I called out, Elena? Nothing. I tried to text her through the app, no reply. The ride still showed, in progress. I couldn't end it while she was technically still the passenger. Finally, I turned the car around and drove toward the main road. My chest felt tight the whole way. Back home, I reported the trip as unusual passenger behavior. The app closed it without comment. The next day, an officer showed up at my door. He asked if I'd picked up a woman near the hospital around 2 a.m. I told him yes. He showed me a photo. It was her. Then he said, she's been missing since last week. I didn't understand. I showed him the ride receipt, time-stamped just hours earlier. But when we checked my trip history, she wasn't there. The ride had vanished completely. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was a glitch, a stolen account, something explainable. But sometimes, when I drive past the hospital, I see a figure under the same streetlight, coat hanging heavy, head bowed. And every time I do, my phone buzzes once, just once, like a new ride request. But when I check the screen, there's nothing there. Story 3. The Silent Passenger. It was a Friday night in October, just past midnight. I dropped off a rider near a hotel when my app buzzed again. Pickup, Derek. Location, a bowling alley on the edge of town. When I pulled up, the place was dark, closed for hours. But under the streetlight stood a tall man in a gray hoodie, hands in pockets, head low. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared until I asked, Derek? He nodded once and slid into the back seat. The address was 20 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood I'd never visited. His voice was low, emotionless. Yeah, that's right. We drove in silence. 5 minutes. 10. Every glance in the mirror, he was staring. Not out the window, not at his phone, at the back of my head. To break the tension, I asked how his night was. He answered flatly, just needed to get out of there. Out of where? I asked. Doesn't matter. The words hung in the car like smoke. 15 minutes later, we reached the address. Only, instead of a lit home, there was a dark, decaying house. The yard overgrown, paint peeling, no cars in the driveway. He leaned forward, pointing. Pull in. I asked if it was his place. He didn't answer, just repeated, pull in. Against every instinct, I eased into the driveway. The house looked abandoned. No lights, no sound. He finally spoke again. Wait here. Then he stepped out and walked around the side, disappearing into the dark. Minutes crawled. Something in me screamed to leave. I ended the trip manually, shifted into reverse. But before I could back out, he reappeared, striding quickly toward the car. His face had changed, something sharp in it, almost excited. He yanked the door open, slid back in, and said, "Take me to the other place." "What other place?" I asked. "Just drive." I'll tell you, I told him he needed to put it in the app. He said nothing. Just stared at me through the mirror, unblinking. Finally, he muttered, "Back where you picked me up." I drove. The pressure in that car was suffocating. Every mile, I felt his eyes drilling into me. At one point, I tried to lighten the mood. "Rough night, huh?" His answer, "Not yet." When we returned to the bowling alley, I parked under the same light. Before I could say anything, he leaned forward and whispered, "You ever wonder how you're going to die?" My throat closed. I forced out a nervous laugh. "Not really." He didn't smile. He leaned back, stared out into the darkness, and said, "I think about it all the time." Then he stepped out. For a moment, he lingered with the door half open. He looked back at me and said, "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." He shut the door and walked into the shadows behind the alley. Gone. When I got home, I checked the trip details again. The name was gone. No photo, no history. Just blank, like the ride never existed. Uber support told me the data sometimes disappears if a rider cancels midway. But I know what I saw. I know he was in my car. And I know what he said. 3 rides. 3 nights that could have ended very differently. These stories aren't about bad service or awkward conversations. They're about the thin line between routine and nightmare. You don't know who's behind the wheel. You don't know who's waiting at the curb. And once the doors lock, sometimes it's already too late. So next time you watch that little car icon crawl across your screen, remember, every ride is a leap of trust. And sometimes, trust is the last mistake you'll ever make.